Welcome to the Escape into Board Games podcast.
I'm Chris.
And I'm Matt.
And this is our escape from the real world where we talk about board games. In this episode, we talk about board games that flow.
So please join us for the Escape into Board Games podcast. In the realm of human experience, there exists a state of consciousness so profound that time becomes elastic, challenges become exhilarating, and every action seamlessly flows into the next. This state, coined as flow, has captured the fascination of psychologists, philosophers, and researchers alike. In this episode, we delve into the intricacies of the flow state and explore its unique relevance in the world of board games.
Flow is described as an effortless effort, a sensation where individuals feel propelled through an activity with an almost supernatural grace. It's a state where distractions dissolve and the passage of time takes on a peculiar quality. Flow feels flowy, a moment of rapt attention and total absorption. The challenge skills balance, often referred to as the golden rule of flow, is pivotal. Flow emerges when the challenge slightly exceeds one's skill set, demanding focused attention and a perfect harmony between effort and capability.
This delicate equilibrium resonates profoundly with the dynamics of board games. Board games, with their diverse mechanisms and immersive themes, provide an engaging platform where challenges are finely tuned to match a player's skill level, offering an experience that goes beyond mere entertainment.
There are triggers that induce the flow state, from basic concentration to more complex factors like novelty, unpredictability, and awe. Board games have intricate designs, unique art, and unfolding narratives that possess the potential to activate these triggers, creating an environment conducive to flow. The joy derived from problem solving, strategic thinking, and mastering game mechanics aligns with the principles of flow, making board games a natural catalyst for this optimal state of mind.
The motivators driving flow, from curiosity to passion, purpose, autonomy, and mastery, are quite comfortable within the context of board games. The act of playing a board game becomes a journey from curiosity, leading to the development of passion for the game, a sense of purpose within the gaming narrative, the autonomy to make strategic decisions, and the pursuit of mastery in understanding proficiency of game tactics and strategies.
In essence, board games emerge as a quintessential catalyst for triggering the flow state. The interplay of challenges and skills, the strategic depth, and the immersive narratives create an environment where players are not merely engaged, but transported to a state of optimal experience.
As we delve into the psychology of this state of mind in the context of board games, we uncover a captivating intersection where the joy of play converges with the profound state of flow, elevating game design to an art form.
So please join us as we talk about games that flow, board games as a catalyst for the flow state. What I wanted to start with was I was not familiar with the state of flow.
Okay.
And I had trouble with this concept.
Yeah.
When you first introduced this idea to me, probably, a year and a half ago, we've been talking about this for quite some time.
Yeah.
I was very confused by it, not really understanding the state of flow and how it relates to board games per se. My first thought was, we call that the zone, right? I'm in the zone. I got to get in the zone.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, don't bug me. I'm in the zone. I'm really getting a lot of work done. I'm getting a lot of studying done, that kind of thing. I'm in the zone.
Exactly. The idea of flow has been around for a long time. Famous philosophers have been studying flow. Goethe in the mid-1700s and Nietzsche in the mid-1800s and William James. And most recently, Mihai Csikszentmihalyi is considered to be the godfather of flow psychology, and he coined the term flow, and he lived from 1934 to 2021. So some of this is relatively new science. It's all about the pursuit of happiness and the meaning of life kind of stuff, right?
Yeah.
He went around and he asked people, when are you the most happy? When are you the most satisfied and most content? And it didn't matter where he went. The answer was always the same. And it was when people were focused on their task, or they're lost in whatever it was they're doing, whether it was laundry or work or whatever. They were just like in it, and everything else would fade away, and time would feel weird, either go really quickly or go really slowly, right?
Yeah.
And when I heard this being described, this state of flow and this effortless effort, and how everything just seems to like click, right? I was reminded of many, many times when I was playing board games, and just everything would come together in that game, and you would lose track of time. Like 5 hours would go like that, right? They would just be gone.
Yeah.
And you'd be lost in this single activity. The phones would be off. There wouldn't be any disturbances. You would be there. And we've talked about this in previous episodes, where you set up a game and you get into it, and it's almost as if you're there. Like you go to this place of the game.
Yeah, you're transported there.
Yeah, almost like a virtual environment, but it's like all consuming. And that really clicked with me. I'm like, okay, so can board games trigger the flow state? And the more that I learned about the state of flow, the more I realized, yeah, it's actually a pretty decent catalyst.
I love that you made that connection, because it really does work really well. Board games do work really, really well. It really clicked for me when I was talking to my wife, Sherry. Her and I had talked about the state of flow and what you had said, and I said, I don't really understand it. And she seemed to understand it more than me, of course. And I was explaining this new game to her, what I liked about it. And I was saying, you know, I like this and I like that. And while I'm playing it, it just feels like the world disappears.
Yeah.
Like it's just me. Like there are other people at the table. There's 3 or 4 other people at the table. And I'm making all these decisions. And I don't care what your score is. I don't care what my score is.
Yeah.
I honestly don't know what you've been doing. It's like, yeah, okay, your turn's done, my turn.
Yeah.
And I'm just thinking about strategy and working out the puzzle of how does this work with this? And first I have to do this, then I have to do that, then I have to do that. And if I do this, it can be more efficient. And if I do that before this, and all those kinds of things that we love about board games.
Exactly.
And she said, oh, that sounds like flow. And I went, oh, now I understand it. Now I see how that state of flow comes in board games. I think part of it is board games is such a huge term for such a big world, you know?
Absolutely.
With so many different kinds of games. And it does not come with every board game.
Agreed.
Not even half the board games, probably not even 3/4 of the board games. But there are certain ones, and it's probably different for everybody else, where the world just kind of melts away and it's just me and the board game.
Yeah.
I was reminded of the first time I played Wingspan. We talk about Wingspan in our Great Games for Giving episode. I really had that state of flow. Like I really, really experienced it.
Those synergies and the combos, and there's so much going on in those cards, right?
Yeah, and just sort of like, okay, well, this card will pay for that, and then I'll get food to play this bird, and then this bird will give me this, and then that will be used for this. And it was just like, wow, first of all, I love this game, and it's over so fast. Like I felt like we'd played for about 20 minutes. And, you know, it was a 4-player game. It was, you know, an hour and a half for our first game.
Yeah, but it just flew by.
Yeah. The only thing I really remember about the other people at the table was just, I kept saying, I'm sorry, I'm still thinking.
Yeah.
You know, it was just like that. So that really kind of put it together for me. I was reminded of those games. Wingspan was a big one for me in terms of getting into that state of flow, especially the first time. And I guess too, not every game does that all the time too, right? You have to be in the right headspace.
Yeah, exactly. And then there's that golden rule that we talk about, and it's the balance of the challenge and skill set, where what you're doing slightly exceeds your skill set. So it demands your attention and it demands your focus in order to succeed. And this is why I think board gamers, like who really delve into the hobby a lot, might experience this sensation more than casual board gamers, because you really have to be comfortable with being uncomfortable, right? You need to be like, okay,
Right.
this is a new game. I'm going to sit down and I'm going to learn it, and I have to pay attention. I have to push myself, right, to do that. And of course, there's a lot of times when we're not in the mood to do that, learn a new game.
Sure.
And we're going to play something we've played before. But when we do have that effort to get those games to the table, they offer that curiosity, right? We're going to be like, oh, this is a new game. What's this about, right?
Yeah.
And that curiosity, look at this art. Oh, wow, I've never seen this art before. Wow, it's fascinating. And what we get with curiosity is attention for free, right?
Yeah.
The curiosity is driving our attention, and we are now paying attention without even trying.
Right.
Because I want to know more about this.
Yeah. I'm learning something new.
Yeah. And a game like Wingspan is a good example because we have a giant stack of cards in that game. Like, it's massive, right? It's usually split up into 3 decks because otherwise it'll just fall over.
Exactly, yeah.
You look at the cards, there's flavor text, there's a unique image on there, there's a bunch of things that can combo with other cards, and you realize immediately, oh, wow, this goes deep, right? There's a lot. Because look at all those cards on, I haven't even seen them.
Yeah.
And that's the awe. That's I've perceived this, massive scale of what this game is, and we are just getting onto the very cusp of it.
Yeah.
What combos are possible? What synergies am I going to discover? And right there, you're sucked in. You're paying attention now.
Yeah. And I used the word earlier, puzzle. I think that that's a really big part of it. And I think that's why the state of flow really clicked in your head a lot more, because I think you like those deduction games and those puzzly kind of escape room games and that kind of thing. You like them a lot more than I do and play them a lot more. And I think that's a big factor. Like, I don't necessarily think of the games that we're talking about as puzzle games, and I don't think of Wingspan as puzzle games.
Certainly no.
But there is a puzzle even in something like Wingspan, in that I have to do this before I do that.
Yeah.
But if I do this instead of that, it'll be a more efficient step, and it'll set me up for my next turn a little bit better, because I'll have some more resources or something like that. And to a sense, a lot of games do that. Strategic board games, maybe not party games, but strategic board games, a lot of them do that.
Yeah.
But it's the ones that do it really well.
Sure.
Plus your mindset. You have to be in the right mindset. Like, there are just days when you're thinking about work or family problems or whatever. Right. And it's like, no game's going to put you there.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I think you're right. Like, if you are one of those people, we've all encountered them in the board game world. It's like, oh, I don't really like learning new games. I just want to play the same game over and over.
Yeah.
Or if you're somebody who's intimidated by a new game.
Yeah.
Like, oh my God, that's a lot of learning, or look at all those components, or that big board. You might not be able to get out of that and get yourself into the right frame of mind where you just focus and you focus and you focus and you focus on what you're doing. Yeah. And then before you know it, everything's just disappeared behind you.
When you're in it.
You're in the game, you're in the skills and the puzzle of it all, and you have that state of flow. I have to admit, it was a little esoteric for me. Like, it was like state of flow. What are we doing? What are we talking about? And, new age kind of things sort of popped into my head. And I was like, I don't know if this is right. Like, it just didn't feel instantly comfortable.
Sure.
But I understood the concept when I translated it to, oh yeah, like, I'm in the zone. I got to get in the zone.
So there's these intrinsic motivators that are built into flow. So what we talked about earlier is curiosity. When we open up the box and we're like, what is this about, right?
Yeah.
But then once you get into it, then there's a passion, right? Like, oh, I understand now, and I'm okay. This is what I can do with this, and that's what I can do with that, and that's so much fun. Let's have fun doing that. We know that passion. We talk about that board game passion all the time.
Yeah.
Passion will lead to purpose. I mean, all board games have a purpose.
Yep.
We want to win. We want to be the victor. We want to cross the finish line first, whatever it is.
Want to see how it ends.
Yeah. Trying to get that goal, right?
Yep.
And then there's autonomy. You get to lay out everything out the way you want to. This is how I'm going to achieve those goals. I can do whatever I want in this game, and I can go this way or I can go that way. And having total autonomy over your control of what your choices you make is one of these intrinsic motivators that triggers flow.
Right.
And that leads to mastery, finally, right? And that's when you've played Scythe like 60 times, and it's just all secondhand, boom, 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 right? And you're just like, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that, I'm going to do that. And those patterns and everything are already clicking long before you've put the first piece down.
It could be that was holding me back too. Was I don't know if I've mastered any game, to be honest. I don't traditionally do well in games. I don't feel like I've mastered any of them. I just play them.
So in addition to these intrinsic motivators that can trigger flow, you can also have these sort of dopamine triggers. So when you're doing a word search, for example, and you're looking and you haven't found anything, and then you find a word, right? And like, oh, okay. And that pleasure you get from finding that word, that's dopamine.
Right.
And it's more than just pleasure. It actually enhances your pattern recognition. So you'll find that once you find your first word, you'll find 2 or 3 more immediately afterwards. That's the dopamine.
Wow.
And again, board games are a perfect trigger for this.
Exactly.
Because you get these little nuggets all along throughout the game. Here's a little reward. Here's something that's going to allow you to get more points this way. And we'll use Wingspan as a good example. You get that card that now synergizes with another card, and you realize, oh, if I put that here, well, I've get those, right? That's going to give you a little hit.
Yeah.
And that's going to allow you to see more, and it just keeps going. And that's when it really clicks.
Yeah.
Many board games involve a learning curve where players gradually develop their skills. As a player becomes more adept, they can match their growing abilities with the increased complexity of the game. And this will foster this sense of progress, this sense of autonomy.
Yeah.
Not a lot of games will do that. A lot of games will be like, here you go, right?
Yeah.
There's no complexity, no depth in there for you to sink your teeth into and feel that progression. And then there's other games which are like massive learning curve is super sharp, and you're not getting into it unless you've watched a bunch of videos off the bat, right?
Right.
So finding that game that has that gradual introduction, it leads you in, easy to learn, lifetime to master, right, sort of thing, as we say, is rare. And so, yeah, of course, not all board games are going to be able to get us into the flow state.
Yeah, I have to say, it hasn't happened in very many games for me. I would say maybe 10% at the most of the games that I have played have a potential for it to even happen for me.
Oh, yeah, for sure. So I've dabbled a little bit in some really heavy board games like Kanban, for example. A friend of mine taught it to me. So that's a Viticulture game. It's incredibly heavy, and it has art by Ian O'Toole. I don't know if you're familiar with any of Ian O'Toole's art, Chris, but
I don't think so.
He has this knack of laying out the board so that it is incredibly intuitive and very, very complex games with very, very complex ideas. But everything on the board fits and it's beautiful. And I think he's part artist and part graphic designer. It's almost an engineering feat the way the board game is laid out. There's all the different things that need to be conveyed, and the symbols and symbology and everything just it clicks, right?
Right.
So while I was playing Kanban, I definitely got sucked into that because it demanded so much of my attention just to understand what was going on. And definitely I would say that Ian O'Toole's art is what facilitated that ability to keep me focused and lower the barrier of entry.
Right.
Because I was able to follow. Right? Because if the art flowed, if that makes sense, right? The mechanisms had made sense because the art flowed. Everything was laid out in a really, really smart way. The only game I own that Ian O'Toole has done the art for is Nemo's War, which is a solo adventure game. The way that it's been laid out and its intuitiveness really, really helps with making the mechanisms of the board game more transparent, right? You're not fighting with the interface.
Right.
The interface is helping us with everything.
Very good. I just looked him up, and he has done the art for quite a few really popular board games that I'm sure a lot of people are familiar with. Games like Carnegie, Merv, The Heart of the Silk Road, On Mars, Ride the Rails, Rococo, Pipeline, Iberian Gauge, Lisboa, The Gallerist, Age of Steam. These are all deep strategic games that are quite heavy, that have an enormous following online.
Yeah.
Very interesting. I've played Rococo. I loved Rococo.
Nice.
And I do remember the art. I remember it being very easy to learn and follow. And
I love that.
Very, very good game.
It's not an easy thing.
Yeah.
I like the cross-section between philosophers who are researching the meaning of life and the pursuit of happiness and what you and I do for fun as a hobby, right?
Right.
And how there's a crossroads there. And I think that I am drawn to the hobby of board games because I do like that curiosity and that purpose that unfolds when you open up a new game. Like, what's going on here? What's this about? And I understand that there's a barrier of uncomfortableness, right? Having to learn the new game, having to read the rules and all that.
Right.
And there's a barrier there. But I also know that once I've made it past that barrier, I've got this wonderful world that I can play in, and time's going to disappear. I'm going to get sucked in. I'm going to be, right, immersive thing, trying to figure out this puzzle, trying to figure out how to beat my opponents and do better than everybody else, figure out how it all comes together.
It's an interesting cross-section, because if you believe what they say, the idea that play is a key to a happier life, we've definitely chosen the right hobby, right? I mean, board games have then become, this way for us as adults to sit around the table and play, basically play like kids, play like when we were kids. We're just playing more, thoughtful, interesting, mature games, but we're playing games with our friends. And if they're right, then theoretically, we've got this hobby that makes our lives better and happier. Viticulture Essential Edition with the Tuscany expansion. Viticulture is a worker placement economic winemaking game for 1 to 6 players ages 13 and up that plays in about 90 minutes. Viticulture was designed by Jamie Stagmeyer and Alan Stone and published by Stonemaier Games in 2015. Dive into the enchanting world of viticulture, where players are transported to rustic pre-modern Tuscany, each inheriting a humble vineyard steeped in dreams of winemaking success. Armed with a few plots of land, a weathered crush pad, a cozy cellar, and a trio of dedicated workers, the race is on to be the first to transform their winery into a triumph of viticultural excellence. The heart of the game lies in strategic decision-making as players allocate their workers across the changing seasons, with each bringing unique tasks to the vineyard. The competition is fierce, and being the first to tackle a job offers a coveted advantage. But it's not just about toiling in the fields. Visitors flock to these rustic wineries, and clever players can leverage their assistance by assigning workers to cater to their needs. These visitors, represented by cards, bring fleeting yet invaluable aid. In the pursuit of winemaking mastery, players use their workers to expand their vineyards, constructing structures, planting vines, and fulfilling wine orders, all in the quest to build the most prosperous winery in Tuscany. The dynamic interplay between worker allocation, visitor management, and strategic expansion creates seamless, flowy gameplay. The sequential complexity, the challenge of optimizing limited resources, and the satisfaction of seeing a carefully planned vineyard flourish make viticulture a captivating experience that can effortlessly lead players into the immersive state of flow. It's the vibrant vineyards bathed in sunlight, where every decision flows you through an unforgettable journey through the vineyards of Tuscany.
Sequential complexity refers to the idea that a process or series of actions becomes progressively more intricate or challenging as it unfolds over time. In the context of board games and other activities, it means that the task or decisions presented to the participant become more complex in a step-by-step manner, requiring deeper thought and engagement as the activity progresses. This can contribute to the sense of flow as individuals are drawn into the evolving challenges and complexities, keeping them absorbed and focused into the task at hand. In board games like Viticulture, the different stages of wine production, from planting and harvesting grapes to aging and bottling wine, exemplify sequential complexity, providing players with a gradual and immersive learning curve.
So it only took us 20 plus episodes to get here. This is my favorite board game.
Yeah.
We all get asked that a lot, right? Like, even by people who don't play board games.
Yeah.
We've only played Monopoly and Risk. They're like, oh, you play board games. What's your favorite one? You have how many board games? What's your favorite board game? And I think most of us, or a lot of us, have varied answers to that. Like, I love them all like my children,
Yeah.
Or you ask me today and I'll have a different answer tomorrow. Depends on the situation, who I'm playing with, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And usually what I say is there's a few that I like as my favorite. And the one that's been my favorite for quite a while, since I first played it actually, is Viticulture.
Yeah.
The Essential Edition. I'm not a wine drinking guy,
Yeah.
I'm not really particularly interested in the process of, what it takes to make wine.
Yeah.
It seems like a lot of work. But the game itself is just so grand. And I love how it creates this sort of, I own the vineyard and I'm sending my workers out into the field.
Yeah.
Those mechanics match that theme so well.
Yeah.
And the cards come to you as orders for people placing their wine. They come to you as guests who want to, come for the day and taste some wine in your cellars.
Yeah.
And the responsibilities of building a bigger wine cellar, or the process of spending money to upgrade your facilities and make it much more efficient for you to create this wine, really demonstrates how hard that job really is, I think. And money is very tight in the game. I think that that's probably very realistic for a lot of vineyards. And it just feels like it matches it so well. Like you feel like, I really did create this vineyard today. I made my vineyard better. I made it. And the way the board is laid out, we talked about the importance of layout as well as art. I mean, the art's beautiful, but the layout of the board is in the different activities that you can do in the different seasons of the year.
Yeah.
So it's got sort of 4 seasons.
Yeah.
In a winery that relies on weather to grow vines and stuff, you can't do the same kinds of things in the spring and the summer as you can do in the fall and the winter.
Yeah.
And that's reflected in the board. And you have to do certain things in the spring and summer to be able to have things that you want to do in the fall and the winter. And that is where that state of flow comes in really well for me. It's about planning your move for this year. You're going to play it throughout the game over a course of years, and you have to plan this year. And by the end of the year, you kind of have to have a plan for next year as well.
That's right. If you don't have vines in the ground, you're not going to have grapes. If you don't have grapes, then you can't put them on your crush pad. And if you don't put them on a crush pad, you can't bottle them. And you need to plan all of this stuff. And the stuff you need to plan is stuff you would need, right? Of course you need grapes to make, right? So those mechanisms make sense and they're intuitive and easy to remember, right? Like, of course, now we're going to plant the vines, and you look and there's a deck of cards that represent the vines you can plant. Each has a different value of grape, and it's a 3 red or a 2 white or whatever. It just makes sense. So that's a really nice red grape. I can plant that in my field and make a really nice red wine with it.
Yeah, and the decisions that you're making, they all seem so important, because if you want to have visitors come to your winery so that they can give you money so that you can upgrade your facilities, then you need to have some wine in your cellar for them to drink. And if you want to fulfill orders, then you need to have the correct formula of what those orders want to fulfill. So you have to make these decisions between fulfilling orders and having some grapes left over to turn into wine from the crush pads at some point. Those kinds of decisions are very important in this game. The consequences of a wrong decision, it's not crushing. It's not a really punishing kind of game. There are other ways to get points. But if your plan is going to go to plan, decisions have to go really, really well. And you have to have, a certain flexibility built into them and think ahead.
Yeah. Like, for example, if you needed money to upgrade your wine cellar, well, you could sell one of the 3 fields you have. Right. And that would give you a short, quick infusion of some cash. You could give a tour, and so a visitor would come and they'd give you $1 to walk around your facility and check it out. Also, you can trade in some cards to get money. So there's lots of different ways you could solve this problem of needing some money. Yeah. And how you go about doing that gives you this sense of autonomy. Well, I can do it many different ways, and how I do that is my decision. And at that point, it feels like a wine simulator as opposed to a game, right? We're not just like making the choice A or B. I can do a myriad of things at this point in order to accomplish what I want to accomplish. And that complexity really elevates it.
Yeah, there's all kinds of options in this game, and the cards provide a whole other layer of possibilities and options of what you can do.
Because there's 2 decks of visitors that you can draft at various stages of the game.
Then there's a deck of cards that are just about orders, and they have different victory points on them and very different requirements, right?
Yeah.
And then there's a deck of cards that are structures that you can add to your winery that'll help you do things more efficiently or get money a little bit easier.
Various upgrades.
Yeah, various upgrades that make things easier for you as the game goes along. There's a hand limit, so you can't hold every card that you contain.
Yeah.
And you can use those cards to spend them for other resources. So you have to be really cautious about what you do with those cards, because if you're holding it for this perfect moment later on, 3/4 of the way through the game, that's probably not the best use of that card. You don't want to get attached to the different things that you can do. If it's too expensive, move on. It's essentially a worker placement game. There is an economic part of it, but it's not an economic game.
No.
In fact, you could even say that the economic side is not having enough money.
That's right.
I mean, there's always never enough money in viticulture to do the things that you want to do.
Yeah, it's tight. Yeah, it's tight. There's always something you want to do that you're not able to do because you can't afford it.
Yeah. It's a worker placement game. I think that's part of why I love the game so much. It's one of maybe my top 3 favorite mechanisms in a game.
Agreed.
There's just so many ways to play viticulture and to score points. I played a game where a friend of ours beat us bad, not fulfilling one single order of wine. He played the whole game just dealing with visitors and exchanging this for that and selling grapes instead of the actual wine and doing that and turning these into points and turning that into this and this into that.
Wow.
And he did the whole thing and he beat us by like 12 points or something.
No way.
Yeah, it was an impressive victory.
Wow.
And I've tried that strategy a couple times because of the way he did it. And it hasn't worked for me yet.
Yeah, that seems like it would be, because making wine is the easiest and best way to get victory points. A single card requires a champagne and a nice rosé could earn you like 6 victory points, which could be quite a lot.
Yeah. But what that showed me was that it can get you a lot of victory points with one card. But it's a lot of process to get to there. Yeah,
it is. You got to make that wine. You got to age that. You got to plant the right grapes.
Yep.
You got to crush them. You got to turn that crush pad into wine, and then you have to age that wine
to the right quality
to earn those victory points. Yeah.
Yeah. And he just, every turn, he was turning things into points. It was quite impressive.
You can build the tasting table, which is one of those upgrades where once you have that, when you give a tour, you're now getting victory points. Once per year, you're going to get a victory point, which is, again, one of those ways. And to me, it's so interesting, the different paths to score points. It's so fascinating in this game. Like you were saying, you don't even need to make a bottle of wine.
Yeah.
You can do it in many other ways. You can sell the crush pad grapes.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's just fascinating.
And it's not like you need a flow chart to understand the game.
Yeah.
It is a bigger game. It's a medium complexity game.
I would say medium.
It's not a heavy game. It's not a super complex game. It takes a little while to teach, like all worker placement games do, because you have to explain each spot on the board where you can put a worker. But what viticulture does in a really efficient way is there's only, I'm not sure exactly, but it's like 4 or 5 different locations for each season. So we can play spring, and I only have to teach you the 5 springs.
Yeah, that's right.
And you only have to remember those for the first round right away, right? Like, it's good to know the rest of the board, like where you can turn the grapes into wine and how you can fulfill orders. But really, all you can do right now is work on spring, because it's spring. And that's a good way for new players to learn. And then when summer opens up, okay, now we've got these spots. Remember, I told you this is where you harvest your grapes. Well, this is what you can do.
Yeah.
And each of those spots has between 1 and 3 different places for workers to go. Like a lot of worker placement games, if I put my worker there and I take the last spot, no one else can do that spot. But viticulture has this neat little twist, is everyone's given a set of workers and a grande worker. The workers are normal workers. So if I take the last worker spot, no one else can put their worker there. But the grande can go anywhere. He's only allowed to work in one of these seasons throughout the year, just like all the regular workers. But he can go to a location that's already full.
Yeah.
So there's always this chance to get the thing that you really, really need to score points for your next turn, basically, is what you're doing.
Yeah.
And you're trying to set up each next year of the game, because each phase is a season, and then you go back and you start another year.
Yeah.
So each year, you're setting up what you want to accomplish for the next year. And that level of I can't go there now because that place is full and I've already used my grande, or I want to save my grande for that because I cannot go another year without this happening, right? That kind of thing. So I can't do that. So now I've got to make a tactical decision about where to assign my workers. Now I have to change my plans and decide maybe I get some cards, or maybe I look at selling one of my fields to make that part of the season much more productive for what I want to accomplish. Beautiful game, great pieces. You've got these little player boards, and they've got wooden cutout buildings, cellars, and a cottage for visitors, a tasting table, like you said,
a windmill, and a irrigation, and
and it looks like a vineyard, like you're, it's all this greenery and, paths in between your fields. And you are starting the game with your pieces lying down. And then as you build these different structures and upgrade them, you turn them upright. And they give you this ability for the rest of the game.
I love wooden pieces. I don't know if it would be the same if those pieces were plastic. Right?
I agree.
It wouldn't be the same. Yeah,
it fits with the theme too, right?
Yeah.
It's not a modern vineyard that you're building. It's an older vineyard, and everything was built with wood.
Yeah.
They didn't have a 3D printer cottage in the back. I wasn't part of Viticulture before the Essential Edition existed.
I've never played it without the Tuscany expansion.
Exactly. But what I understand is that Viticulture came out, and then they did the Tuscany expansion. They had some other expansions come out, and I guess some of those worked really well together.
Yeah.
And when there was time for a reprinting, they created this thing called the Viticulture Essential Edition. And that includes Viticulture and the expansions that work really well with that. That fits in the game. And the Tuscany Essential Edition expansion is what we're talking about today. I've played just the Viticulture Essential Edition, and it's a great game, and it made me love it. And as soon as we played it, we ran out and bought Tuscany Essential Edition and played it right away. And we've never not played without the full meal deal.
The Tuscany expansion is what gives us those seasons, right? The 4 seasons, and we're only dealing in spring until everybody passes into summer, and then we do summer, right? That's the Tuscany expansion. And I find that is, like you were saying earlier, makes your decisions from turn to turn a little bit easier, but then allows you to then focus on the big picture.
I will say it is a race. You're trying to get to 25 points, and then that triggers the end game. Everybody finishes the round. Whoever has the most points wins, kind of thing. And you are constantly looking at what your other opponents, maybe not what they're doing, because you're busy planning out, contingency plans and all this sort of thing. But you are always looking at the scoreboard. And that does pull me out of that state of flow sometimes. Because, you'll see someone sometimes take an early lead or jump ahead really high in the middle. And it's like, whoa, what did they do? All of a sudden, I've got this pressure on me to really produce something good. Maybe I need to change my plans quite a bit. At the end of the winter season, you're going to remove your workers from the board. By doing that, you're going to be opening up spots for people who still have workers available to place.
That's right.
So that's kind of cool. That's very, very, interesting thing. At first, I've taken away this really important part of your plan by, taking the last spot. And then I've used all my workers because I don't have as many as you or whatever. And I take them all away. And all of a sudden, you've got one worker left, and that key spot that you weren't going to get, all of a sudden you've got it.
I love that.
Then what I do is I choose my starting order for the next turn.
They call it the wake up order, and you take a little rooster in your meeple color and you put it on this track.
A little wooden rooster, and you place him on the track, and you say, I want to go here because in this position, say position 3, I get X, Y, and Z as my rewards. But in position 2, I just get X and Y as my rewards. cards.
Maybe they're like visitor cards or some wine cards.
Yeah, there's different rewards for each startup or wake-up order, as they call it. But the catch is the person who goes first gets almost no reward except for the fact that they get to have first choice. And that creates this really interesting wrinkle into the main part of the game is planning out what you're going to do each year.
Yeah.
There's a limited number of spots on each season, and each of those spots are highly contested. You're always trying to fight for the best ones.
Yeah.
I think it was probably created, at least in part, as sort of a catch-up mechanism. You have less workers, so you choose your order in the next round. You could go first or second or whatever. But it really is interesting about what it does to that planning, because you now have to get the things that you have to get. And you have control of that. You can choose second or third and give someone an opportunity to go ahead of you because you like those rewards that exist for third place a little bit better. And hopefully those key spots are still available when you go to put your workers down on the board.
I just love that auction mechanism because, you put your rooster down on 3, and so you can have those a few resources. And 2 would be better because you'd automatically go first, but there's not enough resources there, so you need the free vine card or whatever. But then you're forcing your opponent to then choose, do I want to go first and get the crappy resources, or go right underneath them, go second, and get even more resources? Now I'm getting like 3 things or whatever. And that push and pull and that decision space is always great. Going first can be very beneficial.
Yeah, it's always an important factor in almost all worker placement games that I've played. Is going first is really, really important. Yeah. It's definitely that wake-up order is my favorite part of the game.
Yeah.
It is why I love Viticulture Essential Edition as my favorite game.
I knew that this was your favorite board game before you taught it to me, and it quickly became one of my favorite board games after you taught it to me.
Nice.
And we play it on my birthday, and we play it on your birthday.
Yeah.
And it's one of the games that my wife and I will play together because it sticks in your head. The mechanisms, once they're in, you know them, right? It's one of these easy to learn, lifetime to master kind of games because when we get it out every 3 months or so, we're not flipping through the rule book and what does this space do again? And what does that space do again? It's all very, very intuitive.
Yes.
You got to get those vines into your fields. Then you harvest your fields to get those little crystals onto your crush pad. And then you can turn your crush pad grapes into bottled wine. And of course, if you want to make really good wine, you have to upgrade your wine cellar. And all of this stuff makes so much sense.
Yeah.
This is a perfect example of mechanisms meeting theme and being supported by each other. So now we're remembering everything and the mechanisms seem to disappear now, and now we're just making wine, right? We're just making the decisions of, well, what wine do I want to make? What goals do I want to go to? We're not struggling with what are the odds of this happening, or what does this mean when I do this? It becomes transparent at this point.
Yeah.
And now we're just in the game. We are in viticulture. We're in Tuscany.
If you end up not playing it for 8 or 9 months because you're playing other things, and you pull it out, it's like, oh yeah, I remember exactly how this works and what you're supposed to do. And maybe I don't know, oh yeah, there was a really good card, but I don't remember which one it was. That works well with this strategy.
Yeah.
You might not have the strategy down, but you've got that sort of zone.
Yeah.
And that's where that state of flow happens for me. It's in the planning.
Yeah.
Right? It's in the, what am I going to do this season? What am I going to do next season for the full year? And what am I going to try and do with that next year after that? And the game's played over a number of years.
Yeah.
So you're constantly sort of planning ahead and planning ahead and planning ahead. And while that's happening, your grapes are aging and getting more valuable and your structures are growing.
And you're collecting more visitor cards. And
you're getting more money and you're getting more options and more things that you can do and more workers. And all of a sudden, you're in the thick of it.
Yeah.
Like you're right in this winery. And that's where that sort of state of flow comes from.
Yeah.
Viticulture works really well with all player count.
Oh, yeah.
I've never played the solo, although I have read online that it's some people's favorite solo games, that they like the solo version of it a lot, and that they put a lot of work into the cards that sort of allow you to play solo.
Yeah.
But we play it a lot as 2-player.
Yeah.
We played it as 3 of 4, quite a few, and we've even played a 6-player game maybe twice.
Yeah.
It's a lot longer with a 6-player game because, there's more people and more thinking and that kind of thing. It's not my favorite way to play it, but 3 or 4 or even 5 because then you've got all those spots open up.
Yeah. I have played this a dozen or so, maybe 24 times, and I'm always surprised at how close the scores are. Like, I've played some games where I got a building that allowed me to bottle my own wine, like right in my own cell. I didn't have to use the main board for that, and I did the upgrade where I could harvest my fields myself without having to use the main board for that, and I thought, this is the best game I've ever had in my whole life. I thought I was
killing it.
Gonna I thought I was going to lap everybody. I seriously thought I was going to lap them. And it gets to that final turn. And what's interesting with viticulture is once somebody's crossed the 25-point mark, that will trigger the end of the game. And everyone will play all their workers to the end of the year, and that's when we'll do the final scoring.
Right.
But you can see, Sherry's going to trigger the end game because she's at 22, and she hasn't done her orders yet in wintertime. So obviously she's going to at least get 3 points. She's going to trigger it
this season.
Yeah. And so you go, okay, well, I need to fill out an order. Or 2, maybe I can fill out 2 work orders. Like we talked about before, with the grande, you could put your first worker down on the fill out an order spot, but then use your grande to then do it again. And now you're taking the same action twice. Maybe you can fill out 2 orders on that last turn.
Exactly.
And then you really need all your ducks to be in a row because you can see that last turn coming. And everybody's trying to squeeze out as many points as they can before the end of the year. It's one of the most fun finales to the game.
Yeah.
Once it gets to the end there, it's really quite exciting. It's not this, I know who's going to win, there's nothing I can do type situation. It's everybody's like on the edge of their seat.
Yeah, that's very true. I can't tell you how many times I've been down by 6, 7, 8 points.
Yeah.
And you can see, okay, this is the turn that, this player is going to trigger the end game. And you're like, I've got no chance. Yeah. And then you realize, wait a minute.
I still have that champagne card.
Yeah, I can sell the champagne that I've been trying to get rid of now. And that's going to get me 6 points. And now all I need to do is get 2 more and I'm winning. It's like, how can I get 2 more points? Okay, well, I can sell this, grape and turn that into victory points, and at the end I'll have 1 more glass of champagne available and I can use my last worker to sell that, and all of a sudden I've won by 2 points. It's like, well, how did that happen? I think it's a master class of game design, really. I mean, a lot of Stonemeyer's games could probably fit into that category. But this one in particular, I feel like it escalates the tension, the excitement, and what you can do, and that list of options of what you can do just escalates so quickly as the game goes on. Yeah. And, that you think, there's no way I can win. There's no way. This person's totally got it. And, sometimes you come back and sometimes you just make it respectable. Yeah. That's Viticulture. That's my favorite game. Yeah. I love that game.
It's amazing. So for me, viticulture gets me into the flow because the rules become transparent. I'm in the world, the complexity of the cards and the synergies of the visitors, along with the autonomy of me being able to do whatever it is that I want to do, where it feels more like a simulator. That's how viticulture flows for me.
Yeah.
The next game I want to talk about flows in a different way. Smartphone Inc. Smartphone Inc. is an action queue, area majority, cell phone industry economic game for 1 to 5 players, ages 12 and up, that plays in about 90 minutes. Smartphone Inc. was designed by Ivan Lashin and published by Cosmodrome Games in 2018. We're on a high-stakes journey to tech supremacy in Smartphone Inc., where you step into the shoes of a visionary CEO during the smartphone revolution. As the head of a cutting-edge company, you'll navigate the complexity of pricing, production, and technological innovation to outshine your rivals and emerge as the world's premier smartphone tycoon. This economic simulation Eurogame unfolds over 5 intense rounds, where every decision matters. The game's ingenious planning mechanisms, tablet layering, bidding, and action selection ensure that players must strategically program their moves in advance. setting the stage for an immersive flow of gameplay. From tweaking smartphone prices to operating offices in new regions and researching groundbreaking technologies, each phase demands careful consideration and anticipation. The race to control the smartphone market and maximize profits injects an adrenaline-fueled sense of competition, driving players to seamlessly transition between strategic planning and decisive action. The thrill of outsmarting opponents, the risk of pricing strategies, and the dynamic ebb and flow of the market make Smartphone Inc. an exhilarating quest for corporate dominance, where the flow state emerges from the strategic dance of economic prowess. Will you rise to the top and shape the smartphone landscape, or will you be outplayed in this gripping game of business mastery? Only the savviest entrepreneur will emerge victorious after 5 intense rounds of economic warfare. So what I really like about Smartphone Inc. right off the bat is the way that everything is laid out. And we talked about earlier, Tools artwork and graphic design that goes into his games that he works on, and it helps aid the player along the different phases and along the different, right? What are we doing now? What's this all about? And some games just get it right.
Yep.
And this is definitely one of them.
Yeah, Smartphone does an excellent job of this. You just see the way things connect on the board and what you're supposed to do really, really makes sense.
Yeah. The main board is double layered. It's one of those boards that have little cutouts where other pieces can go, and player pieces or little tiles that'll change the setup or whatever. So right off the bat, we've got a premium product that is the board.
Yep.
Everybody's sitting around looking at this thing, and it's beautiful. It is white.
Yeah.
It is stark white with a little bit of off-white, and then anything that is of relevance just pops.
Yep.
And it's the Earth. It's North America, it's Asia, it's all the, right? It's the Earth split up into different markets.
Right. Different regions of the map all grouped together, and then they're connected with like a series of lines.
Along the top, there is the 5 rounds. We talked about this game takes place over 5 rounds. Well, you've got a little token that fits recessed into the board that tells you what round we're on. The whole thing feels like a smartphone itself, like a tablet. Like it feels like an app.
Yeah.
The pictures and the way the interface and how it all works just feels very appy.
I never thought of that, but yeah, it really does feel like an app.
Each round is split up into a bunch of phases, and then those phases are clearly marked at the top of the board. So there's no confusion of where we are at any point in the game. And there's a little bit of symbology that might be a barrier of entry, right?
Yeah.
What does that symbol mean? What does this symbol mean? But once you know what those all mean, once you see that marker is now moving to the next stage, you immediately go, oh, we're going to do the pricing phase now.
Yeah.
So in Smartphone Inc., players are trying to corner the market. We're trying to produce a decent cell phone at a decent price and have as many people buy it as possible. And this is a really unique economic game. Now, I don't play a lot of economic games.
Yeah, neither do I.
But I found a few things in this game to be really quite unique. The first is the very first thing you do at the very beginning of the round is you get resources. How do you get your resources in this game? And what happens is you're given like 2 cardboard tablets, and they're double-sided, and they have pictures of resources on them. Things that you can use throughout the rest of the round.
Yeah, on these 2 tablets, these cardboard tablets, there's just a bunch of squares, right?
Yeah.
And each square is a different action that you can take at different points in the game.
There's room for 6 possible squares, but there's only 4 icons on each side of each tablet. What you do in this phase is you take these 2 pieces of cardboard and you overlay them somehow. In a lot of different ways you can overlay them. You can't do it diagonally. It has to be orthogonally, so it's like on a hard edge. Mm-hmm. And then you count up all the icons that are still visible. So you're deciding which side will be face up, and you're deciding which icons are going to get covered up when I place the one tablet on top of the other.
Yeah.
And that's what's going to decide what resources you get that round.
So you're trying to give yourself as many options as you can. You want to cover up the blank spaces on some of the sides. It's really neat. Like, this is probably my favorite part of the game.
Yeah.
This is what sold me on smartphone.
There's so many ways you can overlay these two tablets. So you're just sitting there for, 5-6 minutes the first time you play, just like gently flipping them over and sliding them around in complete silence. It's really kind of a unique way to start.
Yeah.
The icons relate to the rest of the actions that we're going to be doing this round, including the very next thing will be to set the price of your cell phones. So if you have a little dollar sign showing, then you're going to increase the price of your cell phone by $1. And if there's a little negative dollar sign showing, you're going to decrease the price of your cell phone by $1. And that is going to determine player order. The cheaper phones get sold first, and it will also determine how much money you're going to get every time you sell a phone. So there's an interesting decision right there. Those are the first and second things you do in each round.
Right.
It's really quite interesting. Other icons that are going to show are going to give you production. So the more little crates are showing, the more cell phones you're going to be making on that round.
Right.
There's an improvement icon that you can do that will improve the tablets you're using. You can spend a resource to then improve the tablets for next round.
Right.
You can research technologies, things like Bluetooth or near field communication or Wi-Fi, right? You can be the first player to have a Wi-Fi on your cell phone.
Yeah.
Well, that's going to take some research to do that. And so you have some research icons showing, then you can allocate some resources to researching those technologies. You also have phase and logistics. So you have to expand your cell phone company into other markets. Everybody starts the game in a different region of the world. There's nobody competing with me up here in Canada. I'm going to do it all by myself, right?
Right.
And competitors are in Asia, they're over in Australia, India. So then after the phases and logistics where we expand into other markets, we then sell our cell phones.
Right.
And again, so this is determined by player order. Whoever has the cheapest cell phone gets to sell their cell phones, and there'll be customers that want a cheap cell phone, customers that want Wi-Fi, customers that want games on their cell phone, customers that want near-field communication on their cell phone. And if you can provide them with a cell phone that meets those criterias, then you sell them a cell phone and you get victory points.
Yeah. I think that's really neat because I think it does a good job of showing that each customer has their own needs like they do in real life, right?
Yeah.
It's like, I want this kind of technology. I want all the bells and whistles on my phone.
Yeah.
Okay, well, those people are prepared to buy that phone. And other people, they just needed to make phone calls with it.
Yeah, exactly. They just wanted it to be cheap, $5 or less.
Exactly.
Yeah. But yeah, with some customers will buy a phone if it's $7, if it has, a decent battery.
Right.
Something like that. And so if you've invested in those technologies, if your phone has those capabilities, you can sell it to more people. If you've expanded to other markets, you can sell it to those markets as well. But you want to sell a good phone. So early on in the game, I'm finding I'm the only one that has near field communication. So I can set my prices for my phone to be $6 because every near field communication sales spot is going to go to me and me only. Nobody can put their token down there. So I can set it at that price.
Right.
But towards the end of the game, everybody has researched all those technologies and their influence, and now we're competing in more markets, and now it's the cheaper cell phone. I want to set my cell phone to be $4, maybe even $3, so I can get all my phones out into the market and clog up all those sales spots before my competitors come
Right.
and try to. And so it's not the same game throughout the whole game. It changes, and you have to maintain this perspective over the 5 rounds is going to, each round is going to offer you a different perspective, a different set of challenges. You want to obviously expand and grow, but you don't always want to, it's really, really interesting.
Yeah. The pricing is really cool the way they do it. They would buy the better phone at a cheaper price if you set it at that.
Yeah.
But the key is just to sell it, right? I mean, to get as many sales as you can for the highest price possible. It's really well done, the pricing.
Because each of the things you want to do, the expanding, the researching new technology, or even just having merchandise to sell, costs resources, which we acquire at the beginning of the phase. This is when we take those 2 tablets and overlay them. So we're making those decisions. If I have a little truck showing Then I'm going to expand into other regions. I need 3 of those trucks in order to make it into Canada, or from Eastern Canada into Western Canada. I need that many trucks. And so if I have all 3 trucks showing, well, that's great. I'm going to be able to expand into that market on this round.
Yeah.
But now that I've done that, now I'm not showing any of the purple gear symbols, and I won't be researching technology this round.
Right.
And I won't have the Wi-Fi or the battery in order to sell to those markets. So it's this push and pull, this what decisions, where am I going to expand to first? Where am I going to focus? There's not enough time to do everything. And it's a tight game. And so I just love that decision of what resources we're going to get at the beginning of the round will dictate the rest of the turns. The turn order is going to be determined by the price of the cell phones too. And if I have $- on my tablet showing, well, then that means I've got one less of the other icons showing, because I wanted to show that $. Well, now I'm going to have less technology expansion. I'm going to have less logistics expansion,
right?
Because I've priced my phone that way. Right? It's just so, it's rich.
The orientation and how they overlap of those 2 tablets is everything in this game.
Yeah.
They have obviously put a lot of thought into where the different squares can go.
Yeah.
And what you would be required to cover up if it was orientated, on a 90-degree angle, or, on top of each other, this vertical or portrait or something like that. And it's really, really clever. So there's this improved production phase. If you have that improved production phase icon on your tablets, then in player order, we're going to take one of these cardboard tiles, and you can then use them or not in future turns when you're deciding the orientation of your tablet. So the tiles will cover some of the squares on 1 or 2, or depending on how many of these you have, to upgrade your tablets, changing, temporarily the different options that are available to you when you're making those decisions.
Yeah.
That is brilliant.
So maybe you get another tablet, a little 1x2 that has 2 icons on it, and there's like 2 logistics expansions. So now you're trucking way across, right? You can do way more expansion on your next turn.
Yeah. And you can use it to cover up a blank spot and one of your pricing squares.
Exactly.
Or, next turn you want your phone to be a little cheaper, so you use it to cover up your upgrade section or that kind of thing. And it just brilliant. Like they have put so much thought into this, and that's where the downtime comes, the planning comes from.
Yeah.
What little downtime there is in this game, you're sitting there thinking about, okay, I can do this, I can do that. If I use that other side.
Yeah, but everybody's doing it at the same time. And so very rarely have I found that with one player going, okay, I know what I'm doing.
Yeah.
Because you look at it, you go, okay, well, this is good, right? You take the 2 tablets, you put them together, you look at that, and you're like, yeah, that's pretty good.
Yeah.
But then you're not content with just leaving it like that. You want to shift it around. What if I flip this over? What does that give me? Oh, wait, no, that gives me, what do I want to do again?
Yeah, you realize all of a sudden you've tested it out, and you realize, oh my God, I don't have that icon.
Yeah.
That I need, or I only have one of those icons. I need 2. And it's like, okay, so I got to redo this. Okay, let me think.
I got to redo it all.
And that's where for me, the state of flow comes from.
Yeah.
It's like all of a sudden you're sort of looking at the board, you're looking at the icons, you're looking at what resources that you can get and what you want to accomplish. And you're like, okay, I've researched half of that Wi-Fi technology, so I need to have some research icons available. Yeah. And you're like, oh, but if I do this, I can have all the research I need, but I won't be able to expand my markets or that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So very, very, very clever. Very interesting.
I like it a lot.
So you get these little player trays, I guess you would say.
Yeah. All their tokens are like complete in this little tuck box you get.
The company Cosmodrome has put a lot of thought into these and how they work.
There's little compartments for your various cubes, and when you are doing your layering, the first phase of the round, you're going to determine how many cell phones you make. And once you figure out, this is going to generate me 5 or 6 cell phones, you take those cubes and move them from one compartment to like this little elevated compartment. You're like, oh, yeah, this is what I get to spend here. And it kind of helps you keep track of those resources throughout the round. And then when you research certain cell phone technologies, that if you're the first person invent Wi-Fi, for example, then you get that little token. It comes off the board and slides into your tuck box and is like displayed for victory points at the end of the game or an ongoing bonus.
And the components are all these translucent little pieces. When the light hits them, they've got gradations of color, and it just makes that sort of white board, the pieces really pop. Yeah. Very, very cool. It's very well designed game. And not hard to learn. Like it's a super easy concept.
Yeah, it's just that iconography. Well, once you've got the iconography down, and there is a little cheat sheet that they provide.
Once you've sort of figured out what those 8 to 10 different icons are and how they work, then you've got it.
Again, this game feels like it's an ecosystem that we are invited to play in, and it is the art choices that we're making during the game that bring the game. It's a different puzzle every time because of what our opponents are doing. Unlike Viticulture and what we talked about briefly, Wingspan, this game I find has way more player interaction, and not take that sort of player interaction, but we do have to be mindful of what other players are doing, what technology they're researching, where they're located, and what the cost of their cell phones are. And I'm not a good player at that. I don't tend to succeed well when I have to anticipate what my opponent might be doing because I'm spending too much time thinking about what I want to do. But this game doesn't so much I have to anticipate their strategy so much as tactically react to what they've done. And so I enjoy that. I don't like a lot of take-that games, and I don't like a lot of parallel solitaire games. I find that this is a nice sort of middle ground between the two.
I am able to sell to customers before you, so I can take the spots that you want to take. But your phone has different technology than I, so I can't take all the spots, but I can take a couple of the cheaper ones, maybe one of the better ones, and then you're going to get whatever is left in certain regions.
So it's the interface, it's the way it's been laid out. There's a flow to the game that once you're over the iconography and you're past the teaching stage, the rest of it, again, sort of disappears, and it's you and this environment. The nuts and bolts of the game don't get in the way.
It's an excellent game.
Agreed. So Smartphone Inc. will run the risk of your flow getting interrupted by the other players and the interaction because there is quite a bit going on in that game, and someone can disrupt your flow by pricing their cell phone lower and just getting in there and taking up all your spots. And then you're stuck, right? It can be quite, what am I going to do now? Like I had this whole plan and what happened to that? But I forgive it that because it's such an excellent game.
Yes.
I think a good example of a game that doesn't have that is the game we're going to talk about next. And it's a lot like what Wingspan was for us when Wingspan first came out. Earth.
Earth is a hand management, tile placement, engine building environmental card game for 1 to 5 players ages 13 and up that plays in about 90 minutes.
Earth was designed by Maxime Tardif and published by Inside Up Games in 2023.
Embark on an awe-inspiring journey into the heart of Earth, the board game that encapsulates the beauty and diversity of our planet's ecosystems, from the intricate dance of flora and fauna to the symbiotic relationships that define our world. Earth invites players to delve into the rich tapestry of life that has evolved over millennia.
In this open-world engine builder, players become architects of nature, weaving a web of extraordinary synergies that mirror Earth's boundless versatility and abundance of resources. The game's simple rules pave the way for a multitude of strategic possibilities, allowing players to craft self-sustaining engines of growth, expansion, and supply. Even the unused elements find purpose as they transform into compost for future growth.
With an encyclopedic array of cards and an immense variety of combinations, Earth ensures that each playthrough is a unique exploration of synergies and connections. The game's immersive nature, coupled with its strategic depth, creates an environment where players can effortlessly slip into a meditative trance.
As you unveil the secrets of Earth's ecosystems and cultivate your own interconnected engine, Get ready for a gaming experience that mirrors the awe and complexity of our planet's natural wonders. Explore, adapt, and thrive in Earth. In Earth, players are controlling their own island, which is a tableau of cards in front of them, and with that, trying to gain as many victory points as possible. Person with the most victory points wins.
There's a lot going on in Earth, but essentially it's an engine building game.
Yeah.
You're putting these cards into your tableau, and those cards give you benefits and opportunities for victory points. And it's a fairly big tableau.
It's a 4x4 grid called your island.
Added to that 4x4 grid is the starting cards that you get, which is your island card and then a climate card. And on them, they will have some abilities or some icons that will be added to whatever you put into your island in your tableau.
So right off the bat, everyone's starting off the game with the very different starting position.
Yeah. The game comes with a number of different starting cards. They're all double-sided, which is kind of weird at first when you open up the game. But what that does is gives you an enormous variety of what you can use the cards for. There's close to 300 cards in this game.
Yeah.
You get something like 280 Earth cards that you're using. But those starter cards are double-sided, and it gives you so much more options of what you can do. You deal out 2 or 3 to each player, and they choose one of each. And then you have to choose what side of that card that you're going to use. And each one has its own unique set of sort of starting resources. It has its own set of icons that are going to be added to the icons in your tableau that can score you points potentially. They may have some abilities that you can use during the game when it's your turn or when it's someone else's turn. Like we talked about in Wingspan, it's an astounding number of cards.
Yeah. And they're all unique, like no 2 asparagus cards.
No, exactly. And they all have their own set of icons on them that interact with other cards really, really well. And, right off the bat, you see this is a big game. Not one that is terribly complex. It's a mid-weight game, I would say. It's easy enough to learn. Like you get started relatively quickly with it. There's a lot of icons to learn.
Yeah.
Once you've learned those icons and what they can do, and thankfully you can learn them sort of in stages, it's not a difficult game at all. It's really quite a simple game with very few hard and fast rules of what you have to sort of memorize. And it gives you this real wealth of options.
Yeah. Because again, it's one of these games that is offering us a ecosystem to work in. We have the agency to maneuver within that ecosystem any way we want.
Yeah.
There's no hand limit. And so you can acquire cards and just keep acquiring cards, have a big fistful of cards, and then you've got way more options going forward. But you can also discard those cards into your own personal compost pile. And when you do that, each card in your compost pile is worth a victory point, right? And so there's more than one path to get victory points, and you've got this tremendous amount of agency over what you can do. And then when the cards get into your hand, that's when they offer you, right? What if I played this, then I could take a blue strategy. The patterns will start to unfold as you go through the game.
Yeah. The cards give you a lot of different options. They are, essentially multi-use cards. Not all the cards, but some of the cards allow you to place pieces on them, which are like tree growth that grow on the card, and they'll give you points at the end. Some have room for sprouts, which are cubes you're going to be collecting and getting points at the end. Some have, like I said, a series of icons that you're going to be collecting the icons to turn into points.
Yeah.
And then they actually have actions on them. And those actions can be used in the game for the rest of the game to grow your resources and your points in this game.
That's the engine that we're talking about in this one.
Yeah.
In Earth, when it comes your turn, you can take one of 4 actions, and those 4 actions are coded. So the planting action is like a dark green, compost is an orange, watering is blue, and growing is like a yellowy color.
Yeah.
And so when you take that action, then you can activate all the cards in your tableau with the matching color.
Right. So the action itself gives you some sort of benefit, right? Like planting lets you plant a couple of different cards. Watering gives you some sprouts that grow up on your cards, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But when you take that watering action, which is the blue action, you get to use all of the blue actions that you put into your tableau already, which is fantastic.
It's just so there's this engine that as the game goes on, each of these actions are going to become more and more powerful.
Yeah.
Cards from your hand played into your tableau cost soil, right? That's the currency in which to play cards. Really powerful cards are going to be expensive to put down, maybe 8 or 9 soil.
Yeah.
And so you're going to need that dirt in order to play those cards. Well, you can play the composting action. If you played the orange action, told everybody we're doing orange now, well, you're going to get 5 soil right off the bat.
Yep.
But then maybe some of the cards in your tableau, or maybe even on your island card can have an orange action on it as well, giving you even more soil.
Yeah.
And then you can get an soil engine going, getting 6, 7, maybe even 10 soil. So now you're able to spend and plant those really expensive cards. And it's such an interesting, each one of these actions is going to give you quite a few resources. And it's just a matter of, are those the ones you want with the strategy that you've adopted?
You're building this engine, and as the engine grows, so does the complexity of all the options of what you can do.
Yeah.
Which is awesome. But that's not enough for the game of Earth. If I take the orange action, I get the full benefit. I get the 5 soil, and I can also compost a couple cards. That's the composting action. So I get the full benefit of it. But on my turn, everyone else in the game gets a lesser action or a lesser benefit of the composting action. When I compost, everyone else gets to take 2 soil or add 2 cards from the deck into their own compost pile.
So it's not nothing, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's really good. So I'm getting the big benefit because I chose the action and it's my turn. And everyone else at the table is getting that, really good lesser action as well. It's the same color action. It's the same thing. It's just not the full benefits of that action. And then we simultaneously all doing the orange action in our tableau.
Yeah.
We're all getting the benefits of that.
Any orange card will offer you a bonus, right? I can now turn 2 dirt into 3 growth if I want to. Or I can turn 3 sprouts into 4 soil.
Right. Yeah. And on those cards, you have to resolve them from top to bottom, left to right in your engine.
Yes.
Whether your engine's almost complete or just has a few cards in it, you have to do the top leftmost card first and the bottom rightmost card last.
That's important because it could give you a bunch of free dirt at the beginning, and then you can turn that dirt into something else later on the tableau if the cards are in the right order.
If they're in the opposite order, then it doesn't help you so much. Yeah. It is complex, but not difficult.
Yeah.
It's this really interesting series of decisions that you have to make in terms of what cards you play, what orders you put them in, the combination of the symbols on them, the pattern that you're creating, because some cards will say every time you add a sprout to a card in this row, you get to add a sprout to every card in that row.
Yes.
And it's like, okay, so now I want to put, all my mushrooms in that row because all my mushrooms will sprout one time every time I add one to any of them.
Yeah.
Some of the cards are called ecosystem cards, and everybody gets a goal card, which is an ecosystem card that is theirs for them personally to do. And then there's 2 available for everyone to do. And those cards add their own layer of complexity on top.
Yes.
And they may say, you get a point for every mushroom that has a sprout on your island, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So now you've got this little engine that's letting you add sprouts to all your mushroom cards that you put in a row or in a column. And it's fulfilling one of your ecosystem goals that you're trying to achieve.
Those ecosystem cards will change from game to game, thus making each strategy for each time you sit down to play Earth completely different. Like, what are we trying to do this time?
Yeah.
Well, in this particular game, we're going to get 3 victory points for every card in our tableau that costs 3 soil or less. Well, now I want to fill my entire tableau with cheap cards in order to get those extra points that will satisfy that ecosystem. But maybe that one sticks out and doesn't really synergize with the other 2 ecosystem cards we're playing with. I might just ignore that one and try to accomplish the other ecosystem card goals and try to get victory points there.
Yeah.
The other way we can get victory points is completing the animal cards. And for me, I just think this is just fantastic. Our tableau is an island, and the nature of our island depends on which side of that card we use, and then the climate of the island will also determine what our tableau is looking like. And now we're trying to satisfy criteria for the animals.
Yeah.
The animals are for everybody. There's 4 animal cards showing face up, and it'll give us some sort of goal, and maybe that goal will be
fill 2 or more columns in your island.
11 plus cards, each with victory points of 3 or less.
6 or more blue ability cards.
8 or more cards with a mountain habitat. The 2 different kinds of cards that you're putting onto your island or into your tableau are fauna and terrain. And so it might be asparagus,
banana tree,
catgrass,
the giant sequoia,
northern highbush blueberry,
the beefsteak fungus,
red pine. These flora cards will have a habitat element, a victory point value. We'll be able to hold growth and or sprouts, and also have an action associated with them. And those actions are color-coded. The terrain cards, like solid field magma,
shrubland,
swamp,
volcanic grounds,
wetland,
pasture.
And these terrain cards will often have a way to collect victory points based on the other cards around it. Like maybe 2 victory points for every water type terrain on the player's island, or 5 victory points for every mushroom adjacent to this terrain card.
And then sprinkled in amongst all of the cards are an assortment of event cards, like high tide,
rainbow,
volcanic eruption,
flash flood,
typhoon,
hot spring.
And they usually provide some sort of windfall of resources. They might give you some dirt, they might give you sprouts, they're going to give you some sort of resources.
Yeah, like a one-time thing right away.
Yeah, it's a one-time thing, and it goes into a special discard pile, and they will help you accomplish some other part of the game, right? Like, oh, okay, on this turn, I'm going to need a lot of dirt to plant this really valuable card, and so I'm going to have this volcanic eruption that gives me 7 dirt or something like that. And then at the end of the game, the event cards usually have some sort of fee. They have a price that you have to pay.
A cost.
Yeah. They're either like 1 or 2 victory points for you at the end of the game, or they're more likely a -1 or a 2 for playing the actual event.
Yeah.
You've got this bonus, so you lose a couple points at the end.
The game ends when a player has completed a 4x4 grid if they put the last card into their island. And then we are going to score the victory points on each of everybody's island cards, victory points from the event cards players played, a victory point for every single card in their compost pile, 1 victory point for every cube/sprout on the board. You're going to score the growth, which are those trees that are growing on each of the cards. You're going to get victory points for each of the terrain tiles, like get 2 victory points for every mushroom in this row, that kind of thing.
Right.
Then you're going to have the ecosystem card on your own player board, the 2 ecosystem cards on the main player board, and then we're going to score the animals if you got any of those, right? And so there's all these different areas where the victory points are going to be coming from.
Yeah.
It takes a little spreadsheet at the end of the game to total it all up.
Yeah, but it's really good. It comes with a score pad that has it all broken down, very, very easy to follow and understand.
It is. It's not overwhelming at all.
Yeah.
It's just so many things that are going on. It's interesting. For me, it pushes that complexity skill set where there's just enough going on that I can hold it all in my brain.
Right.
Right? And if I can fit a little bit more, well, then maybe I'll try to accomplish that animal card. But I've got these synergies going on with these terrain cards in my tableau, and I'm accomplishing that ecosystem card. And for me, I think that that's good enough, right? I'm going to get enough points here. And if there's any cognitive load that isn't being used, well, then I can apply it to maybe another ecosystem card. But You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
for the most part, you kind of just focus. I'm going to ignore that one and just try to get these done.
Yeah.
And get my points that way.
Yeah. And like where the flow part comes for me is all of that you're doing on your turn. I don't care what's happening on your player board.
Yeah.
In your island, I couldn't care less. The only thing I want to know is what action did you do? Did you do planting or composting?
Yeah.
And the only reason I want to know is because I get to do that action too. I get to do the lesser version of it. And then all of that color actions from my island.
There's so many things going on in every turn.
Yeah, there's virtually no downtime in this game.
Yeah.
Like if you play with somebody who has, immense analysis paralysis and you're not that way, perhaps you'll be waiting a little bit on each turn because that person is thinking.
And if there's like somebody that has a really heavy blue strategy, like in one of my games I was playing, I was going to get victory points at the end of the game for having blue cards.
Right.
And so I had a lot of blue cards in my island. And when I took the blue action, I got to take lots of actions. And so maybe when someone else took the blue action, they might have to wait for me to finish my blue turn before we move on to the next action because my blue turn was way longer than everybody else's blue turn. But this is very, very, very minor kind of downtime. We're talking like not much at all. And for me, this is the game where the downtime comes from not realizing it's your turn, right? You're sitting there thinking about what you want to do. What are you going to do? If I did this now, then I could do this. And then you look up and you go, wait a minute, whose turn is it? And they're all looking at you going, it's your turn. And I'm like, what? Oh,
right.
I was in another space. I was like, I was on my island. I was walking along the grass. I was looking at the asparagus there and seeing how that was going to, right?
Yeah.
I wasn't paying attention to you guys.
Oh, it's my turn. Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry about that. And and lots of times when you're in that groove and you look up and you're like, whose turn is it? And everyone kind of goes, I don't know. I think I just finished my turn. Yeah. Because they're in that space as well.
Yeah, exactly.
Earth is my favorite game from 2023.
Yeah.
It is fantastic. I haven't played it nearly as much as I like to, but I get excited just talking about it because there's just so much going on. It's been compared a lot to Wingspan.
It has that card laying, nature themed engine building, but
yeah, I've also heard it compared to Terraforming Mars.
Okay.
I don't know if any comparisons really work for this game. I feel like it sort of stands on its own.
Yeah.
Yes, it is like Wingspan because it has that engine building component. And yes, the cards do have these synergies together like Terraforming Mars and it's about a planet. But it really stands on its own. It's a masterpiece, absolutely fantastic game. Instantly shot up to, I have a lot of favorites, and you ask me any day of the week, it'll change. But it's instantly shot up amongst my favorite games, and I haven't played it nearly as much as I would like to. And I've played a fair amount, but not nearly as much as I'd like to. Excellent, excellent game. In the state of flow, we are so focused on the task at hand that everything else seems to disappear. It's a magical, immersive experience. Mihai Csikszentmihalyi.
Have you played any of the games that we've talked about today? What's your favorite game that flows? Drop us a line at escapeintoboardgames@gmail.com. Thanks for listening to the Escape into Board Games podcast. Be sure to check us out on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok at Escape into Board Games. If you enjoyed this podcast, please leave a review. It helps more people discover Escape into Board Games. You can get an Escape into Board Games t-shirt at geekygoodies.com/escape. Or you can help us fuel the show by buying us a coffee at buymeacoffee.com/escape into BGS.
This episode is produced by Matt McKenzie and Chris Cormier. Sound editing by Matt McKenzie. Production assistance by Sherry Cormier. Music by John Yasut, Daniel Carlton, and Roman Senyek. See you at the next Escape.